You ever driven a back road at night? One of those stretches where the fog feels alive? Where the trees lean in like they're listening, and your headlights keep catching shapes that vanish the second you blink? It was on a night like that, in the fall of 1998, when Daniel swears he found someone waiting for him on the roadside. A man holding a lantern, with clothes that looked borrowed from another decade. The stranger stepped closer, his lantern light cutting through the fog, and in a voice calm as stone, he asked Daniel, "Do you want to see a sunrise no one else ever has?" The world seemed to hush, the forest, the fog, even the air itself, waiting for his answer. And without knowing why, Daniel said yes. And with that single word, he stepped out of the world he knew and into the hidden world of the Gatekeepers of Eternity. To understand why Daniel said yes, you need to know where he was in life. By the fall of '98, he'd lost his job, lost his sense of direction. The road became his escape, mile after mile of asphalt, with nowhere worth stopping. That night, his truck rattled across the Appalachian backroads. Fog shifted in rolling sheets across his headlights, and every curve of the road felt like it might lead into nothing at all. Then the fog broke, and there he was, the man with the lantern, waiting at the edge of a dirt path, as if Daniel had been expected all along. His posture was rigid, unnatural, like he had been waiting in that exact spot for years. But what unsettled Daniel most were his eyes. They didn't reflect the lantern's glow. They didn't reflect anything. Flat, empty, as if whatever light had once lived in him had been taken away. The man stepped closer and asked, "Do you want to see a sunrise no one else ever has?" It wasn't really a question. It was an invitation, a summons. And Daniel, tired, curious, and maybe more lost than he wanted to admit, said yes. Before Daniel realized it, he was following the man down a dirt path that slipped into the trees. His boots crunching on damp leaves, his breath fogging in the cool night air. The trees seemed to lean closer, watching, waiting, as if the path itself had chosen him. He asked where they were going. The stranger only answered, "Almost there." The man's voice had a weight to it, slow, deliberate, like each word was chosen carefully, as though even speaking too freely might reveal too much. Eventually, the path opened into a clearing, a perfect circle surrounded by trees that rose like dark walls. At its center stood a cluster of buildings, a dining hall with lanterns glowing in its windows, a barn with weathered boards blackened by age. People moved between the buildings, silent and purposeful. Some wore plain, everyday clothes. Others wore long robes that dragged against the earth. None looked surprised to see Daniel. None even greeted him. They just carried on as if they'd been expecting him all along. The man led Daniel into the dining hall. Inside, a long wooden table stretched across the room. Bowls of fruit, loaves of bread, and steaming stew were laid out, as though a feast was in progress. Daniel asked where he was. A woman across the table looked at him and said simply, "With us now." Not a welcome, not a smile, just a statement, a verdict. That night, they gave him a room, a small chamber with a bed, a wash basin, and a wooden chest. The window had no glass, only a shutter. When he closed it, the sounds of the forest disappeared completely. Sometime after midnight, Daniel awoke to a vibration in his chest. Not a sound, but a pulse that seemed to echo inside him. He opened the shutter a crack and looked out. Across the clearing, robed figures moved silently, leading others, men and women in plain clothes, their heads bowed, their steps slow and dreamlike. They gathered at the barn. The door opened with a low groan. A pale orange light spilled into the mist. The first faint glow of a sunrise, though it shouldn't have been morning yet. Then the door closed, and with a metallic click, the latch sealed shut. By morning, the gathering felt thinner. At breakfast, several benches sat empty. The faces he'd seen the night before were gone. When he asked where they'd gone, a young man looked up from his bowl and said, "They've crossed." No elaboration, no sorrow, just a matter-of-fact response. As the day wore on, Daniel overheard fragments whispered by others. The rebirth, the gate. Their voices carried a strange reverence, not the passion of people excited for salvation, but the calm certainty of those who had already given themselves over completely. That's when Daniel understood. The gate wasn't just a place, it was surrender. By evening, Daniel knew he had to escape. He packed quickly as the last light of the sun slipped behind the hills. The forest beyond the clearing looked dark, but it also looked like freedom. He moved toward it carefully, each step measured, praying not to draw attention. But at the tree line, he stopped. Figures stood waiting, silent, hooded, like they have always been there. Then one of them spoke. Its voice was low, deliberate. "Your name, so we can keep you safe forever." It wasn't a request. It was a claim. Daniel bolted. Branches whipped at his face. Roots clawed at his boots. His lungs burned as he ran. But adrenaline drove him forward. Somewhere ahead, the trees thinned, and he burst out onto a narrow service road. A pair of headlights swept around the bend. Daniel stumbled into the light, waving frantically. The car skidded to a stop. Gravel spraying across the road. Daniel turned back. At the tree line stood the man with the lantern. He echoed the same words he had before, this time directed to the driver. "Do you want to see a sunrise no one else ever has?" The driver froze, staring at the figure. Daniel screamed, "Go!" The car shot forward, trying to grip the gravel road. Daniel didn't look back until the forest was disappearing into the night. The man was gone. Or perhaps he was still standing there, patient as the dark itself, waiting for another traveler to stop and listen. Later, when Daniel told the police what had happened, the man shook his head and said, "There's nothing up that road but forest." But the locals, they whisper a different story. They speak of a sect from the 1930s, the Gatekeepers of Eternity, a group that promised eternal life to anyone willing to leave everything behind and cross through the gate. But the gate isn't a doorway, it's a transformation. Those who step through don't just disappear. They shed their humanity, their memories, their doubts. They dissolve into something greater, something eternal. Time for them is not like time for us. A year in our world may pass in a breath for them, or a breath for us may stretch into centuries on the other side. And when, or if, they return, they are not the same. Their smiles linger too long, their voices sound too soft, and their eyes look like they've stared into the sun for 100 years without blinking. Some believe the gatekeepers send them back into the world, not to live among us, but to search for the next traveler. So if you ever find yourself on a dark road, and a man with a lantern steps from the shadows, and he leans close and asks you, "Do you want to see a sunrise no one else ever has?" Think very carefully before you answer, because the next voice whispering that question might not be his.